Good morning, class. It's time for some Gundam history, so I hope you're ready. The RX-78-2 was one of the most important units of the One-Year War. However, the 2 in its name clearly implies that there are other units in the series. In fact, as of now, there are 7 total units in the main RX-78 series. We're going to look at the RX-78-4 and the RX-78-5. Also known as the Gundam G04 and Gundam G05. Today, we're looking at the adventures of the Assault Carrier Thoroughbred, the rear guard of the Federation fleet, and the impact the ship and its mobile suits had on the Universal Century. The story of the Thoroughbred begins in 2003 with 2 different versions of the story being released. The first, and easiest to find, is Gundam Encounters in Space for the PlayStation 2. The Thoroughbred storyline was a secondary part of the game where you could go through different missions and have alternate endings depending on how well you performed in the fight. The other option in 2003 was the manga, whose title translates to Space, to the End of a Flash. This manga not only expands on the characters, both Federation and Zeon, but also adds some more perspectives and some more character growth into the story. In fact, it was so well done that there are actually prequel and sequel stories connected to this manga. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's delve into the characters a little bit. On the Federation side, our 3 most important characters are Ford Romfellow, Luce Castle, and Miyu Takizawa. Ford Romfellow is the pilot of the G05. He is hot-headed, he is rash, impulsive, more or less your typical shonen anime hero. His unit is designed very much for his personality of zipping in quickly, shooting up the enemy, moving on to the next target. However, he's also a character who gets quite a bit of growth, primarily due to the events of the Thoroughbred storyline. Luce Castle is a little bit older, wiser, and is essentially the core of the team. He's able to bring together the gun cannon squad, he's able to bring in Ford, and make sure that they use teamwork and coordinated attacks to take out their enemies. He is not a man prone to rash decision-making. But that doesn't mean he won't take risks in order to win a major battle. Miyu Takizawa is the operator. She helps keep Luce and Ford under control. And when things get more on the emotionally heavy side of things, she's there to be the heart of the team. While she doesn't play a large role in the video game, her role in the manga is very important, especially how she keeps Ford and Luce on the level. And when things start to go bad for Ford, she's one of the people who helps pull him out of his depression. Interestingly enough, she doesn't play as a love interest to either of our main male leads, which is kind of nice, because there's no reason for her to be their love interest. She can just be their operator, with nothing else deeper there other than friendship. On the Zeon side, we have 2 major characters who will play an impact in the greater story. The first is Mallet Sengwin, the commander of the Granada forces. He has his signature, Act Zaku, or Action Zaku, depending on how you want to say it. He leads a squad of very formidable Zeon forces, and he is the kind of fierce opponent who won't give up until the enemy is destroyed, making him a very good rival to Ford in that hot-headed, impulsive nature, but as being more of a leader in what Ford could become, rather than being a hothead who doesn't work well alongside his team. The second character of the Zeon side of importance is Lilia Flaubert. She functions as something of a Kohai to Mallet Sengwin. And when he is finally defeated, she changes in terms of personality, in terms of personal objectives, and becomes a real threat to the Federation. While that isn't really seen in the original story, it is built upon in secondary materials. There are plenty of other characters who do play an important role in the story. However, in the entire course of the Universal Century timeline, most of them do not make that big of an impact. Our story begins at Jaburo. Shortly before the Battle of Jaburo, the Thoroughbred is being prepared, stocked up with mass production gun cannons, the gun cannon team, and the Gundam G04 and Gundam G05, prior to their launch into space. While the preparations are going underway, Ford Romfellow and Luce Castle stumble across Ensign Agar, and he is busy working on a unit we will talk about in a later video called the Gundam Mudrock. This is the incomplete 6th Gundam, RX-78-6, and he is working on trying to make it a more functional unit for the battlefield. Luce and Ford have a fun interaction with him and give him some advice and show him their skills on the simulator. When the Battle of Jaburo actually comes down, Agar, inside the incomplete Mudrock, helps defend the Thoroughbred because Ford and Luce can't really launch, and the gun cannon squad is not quite ready to join the battle. While the Battle of Jaburo was a win for the Federation, if not for Agar, it is very likely the Thoroughbred never would have launched into space, or would have launched into space too late to complete their main objectives. After the Battle of Jaburo, the Thoroughbred launches into space to begin its primary job, which is the rear guard of the Federation fleet. While the Federation fleet is going to slowly make their way to Solomon and eventually Baoku, and had the war gone on longer, Side 3 itself, the Thoroughbred was tasked with preventing enemy reinforcements from assisting in any of the major battles. Their initial fights around the moon were mostly to test out their weaponry and to get a general sense of the strength of the enemy forces. Most of these initial engagements go pretty well for our team, and while Mallet Sanguine and his squad are a bit of a threat, through the use of teamwork and superior technology, our 2 Gundams, alongside the gun cannon squad, are capable of holding off Mallet's forces. However, when the Battle of Solomon finally happens, enemy reinforcements start flooding that direction, and the Thoroughbred is put to its biggest test. Luce, seeing the level of the enemy threat, decides to take a risk on the Mega Beam Launcher. This was a specialized weapon created for the G04. You can't even call it an anti-ship cannon, because it's more like an anti-everything cannon. It is an incredibly powerful weapon. However, in its testing, it was shown to be unstable. Luce, with the assistance of the various engineers, end up finding a way to wire it into the power systems of the Gundam, in hopes of making it more stable and providing the power boost they need in order to destroy the enemy forces. While Luce powers up the Mega Beam Launcher, Ford has an intense battle with Mallet, who by now has recognized the Gundam units, understands the threat of the Gundam units, and wants to destroy the Gundam units. Luce eventually has his weapon charged, fires it off, destroys a large chunk of the reinforcement fleet, but unfortunately, it does overload the systems of the G04. Even the ejection system isn't functioning, and Luce is killed as the G04 is destroyed from its own generator exploding. The damage to the enemy forces is enough to drive off Mallet and his squad, but Ford's morale is crushed by the loss of his friend. As the team recovers from the loss of Luce Castle and the intensity of the last few days of fighting, Miyu Takizawa comes in to try to rouse Ford from his depression and to get him back on his feet and ready to fight. Ford gets his morale back. Not only that, but he gets a nice upgrade to the G05, bring it to its booster mode, or RX-78-5 BST, which adds modifications onto the suit, providing better maneuverability and more speed. Thoroughbred is tasked with a new mission, now that those reinforcements have been destroyed. An ambassador needs to make it to Granada in order to work out a peace treaty. Thoroughbred flies out there and has another knockdown fight with Sanguine's squad. The battle is fierce and intense. Ford finally bests Mallet and kills him, which destroys the morale of his squad, giving them the opening they need to get the ambassador to Granada. Not much longer, the armistice is called, and a treaty is eventually signed, the Thoroughbred having helped achieve this mission. But that's not the end of the story. In the year 0084, Ford Romfellow has been promoted to a lieutenant commander. He is now a member of the Titans and has his own squad. The now Lieutenant Agar is a member of that squad, which is kind of cool seeing these two pilots team up together. Their primary job is to eliminate Zeon Remnant forces. However, they stumble upon a conspiracy featuring a group of Zeon Remnant forces made up of members of the Midnight Fenrir Squad, whom Agar had fought in the past, and Mallet's Squadron, who Ford had fought in the past. And their plan is to essentially fire off a nuke and to destroy a colony. The idea being that if they can ignite another war, the Zeon Remnants can reunite, more anti-Titans people could join them, and they could become a major threat again, more or less continuing the 1-year war 4 years later. To make matters more complicated, Ford's superior says, "We aren't getting involved in this. They're firing a nuke at the Republic of Zeon. Let them do it. This is a Zeon internal issue. Let Zeon deal with their own remnants." It's really odd because it is the Titans' job initially to take care of Zeon remnants. So, like in many occasions, the Titans are basically sitting there going like, no, we want an excuse for war. We want an excuse to use our new mobile suits and our new weaponry. And if this happens and war starts, right on, let's go, let's have a war. Because a lot of the Titans are war hawks, and you just got to kind of deal with that as a storytelling trope. However, Ford and Agar do not see it this way, and end up getting involved in the fight. They prevent the nuclear attack, they defeat the enemy forces, and interestingly enough, don't even kill most of them. They actually get a majority of them to surrender and go to jail. The threat is stopped. However, because Ford and Agar, and the rest of their squad for that matter, went against orders, they were all demoted. Ford and Agar got to the fun job of training new recruits at an Arctic base. Interestingly enough, Miyu will actually do quite a bit of work as a trainer and teacher over the years, making her role, though small, very important to a new generation of pilots. Sadly, it feels a little bit unfair that Ford gets to end his story as a trainer in a remote base. But as new mangas get written, as new stories get told, hopefully we can see Ford showing up as part of Karaba, or the Ayug, or maybe even Lando Bell at a future time. However, that's not the entire story. The manga's third volume is a what-if scenario where Luce Castle survives, his unit also gets upgraded to the BST mode, and he and Ford join into the Battle of Abawaku. They battle against a lot of different enemies, including some Brow Bros. They throw down, they kick some butt, they save the day. Everyone gets to be happy, yay! However, this is Gundam, and that happy ending isn't canon. In addition to that, the video game has 2 other endings. If you fail the final mission of the canon storyline, they will reveal that the Thoroughbred was essentially a decoy, and the ambassador snuck in through another route, because essentially they can't, disrupt continuity by the failure of that mission. The other bad ending comes if you do the save Luce route. When you get to the very end, if you don't fight well enough, it'll be implied that a Zeon sniper takes out Ford before the end of the Battle of Abawaku. If anything about this story has gotten you excited, or makes you really curious about the adventures of these characters, there are a few ways to experience the story. First off, Gundam Encounters in Space for the PS2 is not an entirely hard game to find. It's not the best rail shooter out there, but it's an enjoyable game and has some cool alternate game modes. Alternatively, if you can find it, there is a fan translation of the Space to the End of a Flash manga. It helps flesh out the characters better than the game does, because the game is very limited in its storytelling. Or, for those of you who have access to a Switch or a PS4, there is a game called SD Gundam G Generations Genesis, because of course it needs to have a long title. And this game has a lot of Universal Century stories. It's a pretty good game. It's a top-down tactical game. You're going to have to import it, however. There is a English-friendly Asia version of the game, but it never got a US release officially, at least as of the recording of this video. The story has been told in a handful of other formats, but these are the most easily accessible versions, in my opinion. Thank you for watching. Please let me know in the comments what you would like me to cover in the next Gundam History. While you're at it, please like and subscribe. It only takes a few seconds for you, but it really helps small channels like mine. Until next time, class dismissed.